Greetings and salutations, everyone. I do hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. With that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? This is a very terrifying incident that happened in the Smoky Mountains. During our honeymoon in the Smoky Mountains, my husband and I caught the attention of something unknown and terrifying for a very long week. I had never wanted to be married, neither had my husband. Then we met each other. We were engaged at 30 and 28 years old and had a 2-year engagement. We wanted our wedding to symbolize our true soul bond and decided to go completely non-traditional. His giant family wanted a white dress Catholic wedding, so we were at major odds with the family from day one. My fiancé and I began suffering from a huge run of exceptionally bad luck and some poltergeist activity at home. Nothing too major, so we brushed it off, except when we left the house once and came back to find a red clown nose sitting front and center on our bathroom sink. No one had keys to our place, and we did not own a clown nose. That one was freaky. When I told a friend something weird was going on, to the point I almost felt the wedding was cursed, he was trying to explain it away and said, "Watch, something's going to happen today while he's getting his tux, I'm telling you." I got one flabbergasted look before my fiancé immediately called to say there had been a freak accident in the parking lot while he was getting fitted for his tux, and someone had totaled the back end of his truck. That shut my friend right up. Another glitch was my refusal to have my father walk me down the aisle. I also refused a random stand-in for traditional steak. I asked my younger brother, and he said he would be honored. We had some problems. He had been clean for 7 years, and we had made up our differences. Losing our middle brother to a drunk driver had driven us apart for a while, but brought us back closer a little later down the road. Then, 40 days before my wedding, my brother unintentionally committed the S word in his mid-20s. My fiancé and I drove over 16 hours close to Point Pleasant, West Virginia to say our goodbyes. I knew my brother, and I knew he would not cross over easily with what he had done, especially with my wedding around the corner and me counting on him. This really bothered me. His viewing was closed to immediate family only. He was not embalmed due to a complete autopsy being required. He was covered in a handmade quilt to his chin. We were instructed not to touch him, although we ignored this. After saying our goodbyes, I had walked to the end of his gurney and laid my hands on his feet. I told him I understood it was an accident, and I forgave him. I told him that if he still needed to make amends to me, then he could do so by calling forth my loved ones and those of my fiancé to come witness the wedding from the other side. I made him bring our other brother, my fiancé's sister, grandparents, aunts, friends. I began calling by name all the beloved souls who had already passed. "Do this," I told him, "and there will be no debt between us, and you can rest in peace." The looks on my family's faces was priceless at this point, but I felt this was something I needed to offer. I had a pendant made when I returned to New Orleans. On it was my favorite picture of my two brothers. I wrapped this around my bouquet, and although it seemed to the wedding guests that I walked the aisle alone, I knew that both of my sweet brothers were right beside me in spirit, because they would never miss the wedding of their sister, especially with Hector, the S-word, actively dragging them across the veil to fulfill his last obligation to the living. My new husband Eli and I went to a rental cabin in Bluff Mountain, Tennessee for our honeymoon week. I don't want to name any specific cabin in case I'm not supposed to, but I will say it was very rocky with a raccoon theme. Bluff Mountain is in Pigeon Forge, outside of Gatlinburg in the Smoky Mountains. I was living in New Orleans and had brought a double handful of fresh-picked gardenia blossoms with me. It was a type of symbolic offering to the mountain for having us on such a special occasion. No rituals or anything. I simply arranged them on a wooden box with a fake bird and nest that was sitting on top of the railing of the cabin porch, and set up feelings of gratitude and joy. When we went out to eat and grabbed some groceries, upon arriving back at the cabin, the wooden bird box was smashed into a million pieces on the porch. It hit the ground hard to shatter so far and so thoroughly. I thought maybe a raccoon or a bear. Then I noticed that there were no flowers, maybe the wind. Leaves scattered all over the porch, just like when we had left, made me hesitate. Gardenias are not super light flowers. Definitely heavier than the leaves I had seen. More curious than anything, I looked all around the porch stairs and walkway. I shrugged it off until the next morning, when I went a little way down the driveway and picked some honeysuckle. About 20 feet from the porch, I glanced down to take a double take. There were my gardenias, all of them. They had been piled up and squished flat as crepes. There are no shoe prints, but it took more than one stop to flatten a pile like that. Unnerved, I walked away, wondering if the mountain didn't like my offering after all, and then I laughed at myself for the thought of it. Night 1. Eli wakes suddenly to what sounds like something big banging the support beams under the cabin. The cabin hangs off the side of a hill, so the front half is supported about 15 feet off the forest floor by giant wooden posts. They're being hit so hard that the mirror on the wall is vibrating, which, frankly, should be physically impossible for anyone to do. He says every time he started to drift back off, there was another bang. He gets up fully, and after one more cabin-shaking bang, he decides to wake me. Apparently, he was trying to see if I would wake up from the banging, so he would know it wasn't his dreaming. But now he's 100% up. As he reached for me, he said the loudest bang slap came from the area between the sitting area, kitchen, right at the bottom of the bed. It was a one-room cabin. He said it sounded like a giant book getting dropped from high up, but he was looking right there, and there was nothing. This bang was definitely inside the cabin. He began frantically trying to wake me, but he said I was so deeply asleep he actually thought something was wrong with me. He said he could barely tell if I was breathing. Then this strange metallic jangling sound from behind the TV directly across the cabin from our bed. He said it went on forever, but he was too scared to go look for whatever it was. Over the next to the windows, past the spot where the noise originated from inside, it was an insistent buzzing that finally woke me up. I remember it was so hard to come back to consciousness. I felt like I was literally swimming through blackness to get back to myself. I kept asking, WTF is that noise? I thought it was an alarm someone had left set. Cute. When I finally woke up enough to move and sat up to go find and smash the offering noisemaker, The trilling stopped. Groaning, I fell backwards onto the pillow. Eli started telling me about the banging. I could tell how upset my husband was. I believed what he was telling me, but I was so numb and out of it, I was struggling to come back with any emotional response at all. There was only this debilitating fatigue, and I fell asleep on my husband when he needed me. When a man whom I'd never seen afraid in 7 years was completely terrified, I just zonked out until morning. Normally, I'm an extremely light sleeper, especially in new places. This trip, however, almost every night was like this. No sooner did I put my head on the pillow than I was swallowed by blackness. It was an extremely deep sleep, but it was not restful. Waking up was worse. It was like falling into a coma every night and slowly reviving every morning. It ironically left me exhausted. Day and night, too. While doing my makeup in the infamous shaking mirror the next morning, I was able to get the full story and talk to Eli about it logically. Maybe a bear was rubbing against the post. He says it was solid bangs like a huge fist. No way a bear. And what about the one from the center of the floor, on the inside? That reminded me of the stupid alarm. I told him that I was about to disable the thing. At the exact freaking second I mentioned it, that damn noise started blaring from behind the TV again. We both jumped like rabbits, laughed nervously. Hell, on the way to time it, I joked. Funny, looking behind the TV, I was surprised to see it wasn't an alarm clock, but a landline phone. An old one with a bell buzzer, which explained the horrid noise. Of course, I had to answer it. There was a minute of silence, then a burst of static. It really sounded like someone was talking, but static was obscuring their words. I told them to move to a better reception. Is this cabin management? The silence, garbled talk continued for a while before I hung up. I was amused, honestly, especially with the way Eli was gaping at me. When I hung up, he immediately unplugged the phone, said management had both of our cells, so it was probably a prank call from someone who had stayed here before. But we were not playing along, and ended up in the deliverance scenario. Smart man. Phone stayed unplugged for the duration. That night we were in the hot tub on the deck. It was around the back, had a gazebo-type cover around 3 sides, and no lights too close so bugs wouldn't be swarming you. As we were relaxing, I'm sitting on the open end facing the enclosed wooden strips, and Eli's facing me and the forest. I kept admiring the blue light behind the enclosed end. It was large, about the size of a cantaloupe, and seemed bright, but the glow over us in the hot tub was very muted. I figured it must be an LED of some sort, but I had never seen a light that shade of blue anywhere. All the other lights in and around the cabin were bright and orangey, so I remember saying how it was sweet. They had went for a mood lighting for the hot tub. Eli both looked at it and commented on the light as well. When we decided to get out for the night, the light blinked on and off in what looked like a purposeful sequence before shining for a few more seconds and going dark. We commented that it was strange how the light burnt out like that, and how we were sad to lose our mood lighting. I decided to call the next morning for a bulb when I woke up. I first walked around to the rear of the cabin to see what type of pole or other fixture was the one we needed to be serviced. There was no pole, fixture, or any other light source behind the hot tub. No cables, no wires. The main office later confirmed the instability of the soil back there, preventing anything that wasn't heavy duty from being installed, so no lighting was ever put back there. Whatever that light was, we both saw it, and it was apparently just eavesdropping, because we were out there for 2 hours, and so was it. And if it wasn't turning off or burnt out, that means it was straight up disappearing. Starting this second night after coming in, my skin started to crawl, and every hair on my body stood on end every time I passed the open bathroom. The bathroom was next to the bed area. Lying in the bed, you could see the bathroom sink and the small window above it. The window had no curtains as it faced into the woods behind the hot tub. At this point, I still thought the blue light was man-made, yet I swear there was something looking in the window. I'd been leaving the bathroom door open because I liked looking out at the forest from the bed, but now I tried to keep it shut without Eli noticing I was being weird. Eli told me the next morning that every time he would start to drift off, a resounding bang on the post under the cabin would jolt him up. He said he was freaked out because no matter how long or short the time he waited to lie his head down, it was like whatever it was knew exactly what he was doing, even though he never got out of bed. Once again, he was wide awake and terrified, nothing he could do to rouse me even the slightest. Night 3, after scrubbing ourselves as best as we could in a highly stinky sulfuric water of the cabin, we were getting ready for bed. Walking from the bathroom to the bed, I realized I forgot to shut the bathroom door. Since Eli was already lying in bed looking at me, I just kept toward my side of the bed, telling myself to stop being ridiculous, even though I could swear at that moment something was looking in the window. I'd already looked out several times and couldn't see anything out of place, but I could still feel it. Eli quietly asked me if I could shut the door. Why? 'Cause the window gives me the creaks. Talk about validation. That night I had some disturbing dreams, but I can't remember them. Eli, however, suffered a severe bout of SP that night. Although he swore it wasn't SP because he says he sat up, kicked and yelled at her. Now, however, he says it was probably sleep paralysis. Either way, he woke up to an eerie laughter and saw what he described as a grudge-type woman standing at the end of the bed laughing at him. I wouldn't wake, he said. She wore a white dress, had pale skin, black eyes, and a horrible mouth, long black hair partially obscuring her face, and was surrounded by a swirling black mist. She reached for him, and he sat up, yanking his legs to his chest. This is when he started yelling at her to GTFO and kicking at her. Laughing, she faded out. He said he was awoken by her grabbing his ankles and giggling throughout the night, and would also wake just long enough to catch a glimpse of her. I was still no help. Night 4, repeat sleep paralysis. Repeat sleep paralysis experience for Eli, but he said even more intense. Same lady in white. I had also realized a trinket I had brought for luck and put on the shelf next to my side of the bed was missing. It was a tiny cabin. We tore it apart looking for it for the next 2 days, but I never seen it again. It was worthless except for personal reasons, and no valuables were missing, so I don't think someone came in and snagged it. Night 5, whenever I sat out of the water on the side of the hot tub, I started to get that same feeling of being watched I'd felt from the bathroom window. I would literally break out in goosebumps. It was Friday, and we could hear a group of educated guess here college kids partying hard in the distance, but close enough to hear their screams, whoops, and cheers, not wanting to give an intrepid woods savvy creeper a show. We went in. Not much else happened on night 5, but troubled sleep. At one point, Eli woke to frenzied banging on the support posts, but it didn't last long or repeat. Night 6. This was an extra night we received due to the piercingly sulfuric water in the cabin. The filters needed to be replaced, so they comped us a night. The water wasn't dangerous, just really, really stinky. Eau de la turd, or the rotten egg, bad. And although our nights were weird, we were on our honeymoon and had just been through a tragedy. We spent our days having massive amounts of fun and doing so many awesome things, plus eating great food and drinking good wine with dinner. Gatlinburg is an amazing place to visit. So our last night in the hot tub, it's wonderful, until I start feeling that intense regard from the tree line for the second night in a row. This time it's worse. I can actually feel the ill intent in this gaze. Whenever I come up to cool off, I literally find myself unconsciously wrapping my arms around myself and slipping slowly back down into the water. I remind my new husband how many years he's known me and ask how many times he has known me to be scared or paranoid. I tell him there is absolutely something aggressive in the tree line looking at me, and it is not a college kid. We can hear them again tonight. He scoots over and I move to the covered end with him. Within 5 minutes of moving, we hear a tremendous crashing from the brush behind us, and then something big stomping around directly below us. This is followed a few seconds later by more crashing and a second pair of footsteps stomping around. They sounded like human steps, but no one could make such a loud noise on packed earth below the raised deck and cabin. We jumped up and booked it inside, soaking wet. Eli says that night was the worst for the banging. He said there was banging on at least 3 widely separated posts, and it went on all night. He said when they did let him sleep, the woman would come. I slept like the dead, unresponsive, and everything. Morning of day 7. Something was demanding my attention, pulling me back towards consciousness. At first I thought it was a mounted police or one of the mule-pulled carriages that sometimes passed my place. Nope. This was definitely a whole plethora of horses. Was there a parade I didn't know about? Slowly I remembered I wasn't in New Orleans, and although what I was hearing sounded like hooves, there was no paved roads anywhere near me at the moment, just a small gravel driveway out front. Quickly snapping awake, I realized the sound was coming from the roof. I checked my phone, and it was a few minutes after 8 in the morning. I groaned. Why the hell would nobody tell the roofers that the cabin was booked until 11 in the morning? I looked over at Eli. He was pale and breathing very slowly. I half-heartedly poked him a few times, but he was out. Ruefully, I thought of all he had been dealing with while I slept as deeply as he seemed to be now, and left him alone. I'd been with him nearly a decade at this point, and he had never spoken of things like this before. Whatever had been going on, he deserved sleep. At least it was roofers in the sunny morning and not some weird crap at 4 in the morning. At this point, it crossed my mind to wonder what roofers worked on Sundays. I listened closer. It definitely sounded slightly metallic, but I decided my initial impression held. It sounded like a horse was kicking the crap out of the cabin roof. Well, what the heck do I know about roofing equipment anyway? I'd have to ask them to stop until we checked out. I pulled back the covers, swung my legs off the bed. The instant my feet touched the floor, the pounding on the roof stopped dead, and the handle to the door, which was 3 to 4 steps in front of me, started jiggling violently. 2 things. There was no pause between the noises. They went from on the roof slightly towards the opposite side of the cabin above where Eli was sleeping to the doorknob in front of me without time delay. Also, the top half of the door was glass with a sheer curtain which the sun was shining directly through. I could plainly see that no one was near the door. Yet I could also see the handle rattling wildly. I yanked my feet up and dove under the blankets up to my chin like a kid. I'm ashamed to say, as soon as my feet left the floor, the doorknob stopped rattling, and the incessant pounding on the roof resumed in the same spot, again with no pause between them during the switch. I'm now staring at Eli, wondering if I should wake him. I'm scared I won't be able to, but I'm also just as scared he'll wake up and won't hear it at all. His eyelids flutter open. Taking the decision out of my hands, I ask him if he hears that, and thank the gods he says yes. I'm hesitant to talk about the door when he just opens his eyes, so we talk about what the sound was. He also immediately goes to roofers. I ask if that sounds like a hammer to him. He says no. We agree that it does sound like hooves or something slightly softer on metal. This whole time I realized we'd automatically been whispering, and this pounding just keeps going on and on. Looking around the cabin, we see the mirror shaking, glass in the kitchen area rattling, the cabinets quaking. Whatever is on the roof shook the walls of the cabin repeatedly. The pounding lasted about 35 minutes because I checked my phone right when I woke up to right when it stopped, from around 8:02 in the morning to 8:36 in the morning. Although I'm not sure how long it had been going on before I woke up, it was loud and strong and absolutely terrifying. We lie there whispering for a long time. No way was this a person or people. We started thinking it, whatever it was trying to bust through the roof, although the glass door would surely have been easier to get through. When Eli said he's going to look, I told him about the doorknob shaking when I tried to get up. After a brief hesitation, he threw back his covers and sat up. The pounding stopped. He and I both froze. A terrible grating noise slid on the roof, that broke the silence. We both looked at each other with big eyes and pale faces. Was that claws? I hissed in the quietest voice I could manage. He leapt back into the bed. The banging resumed. The quietest discussion ever followed about if we had really just heard claws up there. We thought it was exactly the sound of huge claws would make, but really, it could still be anything. Eli grabbed his legally owned firearm from beside the bedside drawer and quickly stood up. The pounding stopped for a second to allow for another grinding rasp to sound across the roof. That was definitely claws, I said. The pounding immediately resumed, twice as fast and even harder, if that was possible. I could now feel the thumps reverberating through the bed. Eli told me to stay inside and listen. Whatever it was, it sounded huge, and he needed me to let him know what direction I heard it move in if it ran out of his view up there. He burst out the door and aimed his gun at the roof. The pounding stopped. There was absolutely silence. There was no sound of running anywhere on the roof, and the roof didn't have a damn thing on it. In addition, being perched on the side of this hill, as the cabin was, with no trees close, there was nowhere anything could have gone. We packed at Mach speed, but did have one last smoke in the driveway to help with the shaking and nerves. It was open, so it seemed relatively safe. While we were smoking, we could hear the people who had been partying the last few nights. They were all out yelling for a missing friend. We heard him yelling about the last time they saw him, which was apparently the night before. We could hear their panic as they screamed his name over and over. Eli and I tried to find the group to help look and ask if they had seen or heard anything weird. However, the winding one-way dirt roads were confusing. We ended up getting lost. We actually think they may have been locals, and we couldn't get to them because we were on rental cabin roads, which did not connect to the local roads' driveways for obvious reasons. I really hope they found him passed out drunk in a brush somewhere, and regret not being able to locate them to help them look. I have no idea what this was. Nearly every major paranormal MO showed up. From orbs, weird calls, poltergeist activity, to cryptid-type goings-on, a lady in white. Yet, it all really did seem like one thing in different outfits, if you will. After coming home, we had no more weird activity at the time. I did request for the departed to stand witness from the deceased brother who owed me a favor, but I specifically requested only the blessed dead, and only for the wedding ceremony. This didn't seem like protective ancestors to me, though, so I don't think it was necessarily related. I actually leaned towards some type of nature or elemental type guardian spirit personally, but that is just conjecture. Although he said differently at the time, Eli now thinks it was possibly a Dogman, Bigfoot, although I don't know. Here's a couple of updates. As for the knocking on the posts under the cabin, which was the main activity, my husband was hoping it was a cryptid Bigfoot Dogman, and he was super excited about it, even though it freaked him out. As soon as we decided on our destination, he binge-watched anything about cryptids he could find, claiming the Smokies were full of strange reports. He was really hoping for a sighting. No, he did not scream or knock on trees, lol. For the other, our policy for paranormal type activity is to try to logically debunk it and or ignore it as much as possible, and to not let it affect us noticeably. One reason we unplug the phone. Usually this will cause it to stop when we don't give the desired reaction. This time it didn't work. My husband had his firearm next to us in the hot tub and next to the bed every night, but there was no angle in which to see under the deck from the side of the hot tub was on, and we did not go around the cabin to look under there, as that would have taken us much further from the doors and lights than we felt comfortable with. I was not entirely acting like myself. I thought most of what was going on was amusing when I normally a completely scaredy cat of anything paranormal happening. When the thing was on the roof, I found myself grinning and giggling a few times, but I always put it down as shock or adrenaline or something. Honestly, though, even though it sounded like something big was coming to eat us, I was more exhilarated and confused than scared. I was almost euphoric at times, like when it started scratching the roof. I thought my husband would think I was nuts, but he later said he could tell I was terrified, and sometimes people react oddly to extreme fear. I've always accepted this explanation. As for him, he was very quiet in general and secretive about his experiences, which is abnormal. Once we got home, he apologized and told me everything, and said he didn't really know why he held it back, except that he didn't want me to spend our honeymoon scared. I was a little angry, but I understood his reasoning. My family is originally from the Ohio River Valley, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky, so I heard much of strange things growing up. I've called some family members and asked for old stories. This is how I learned about blue children of the Cherokee Mounds, no luck finding anything at all online about them, and elusive black panthers, known in paranormal circles as alien black cats, that my family swears are flesh and blood. Other than that, it's been hit or miss, mostly miss, with online searches. This area definitely needs more research. I've mostly read thousands of reviews from different cabins out there in Pigeon Forge, and only found one that complained about pounding on the side of the cabin, and they said more annoyed about it than concerned. We followed the news for Pigeon Forge and Gatlin online for months and never saw anything. Hopefully, the guy who was missing had gotten drunk and slept in the brush or something. The agency said the cabin was privately owned, and they would contact the owners with our concerns we had and get back to us. The owners were not interested in responding to our inquiry. They probably thought we were high or something. My great-grandfather saw a Dogman no more than 15 feet from him while taking a shortcut home through the woods from my great-uncle's house after dark. This was in West Virginia, turn of the century. He said he felt like he was being watched, turned around with his lantern held up. He stayed like that for a while because he knew there was something back there and he didn't want to put his back to it. He explained that after several minutes, a huge creature silently jumped from a tree and landed at the edge of his light. It had been following him. He said they just looked at each other for a couple of tense seconds before the creature turned and walked back the way it had come. My great-grandfather was visibly shaken, and he never walked home from his brother's farm again after dark. He's salt of the earth, a no-nonsense man. This was the only time anyone ever saw him truly scared. No one in my family has ever believed that this creature was anything but flesh and blood. The story is still told to the younger ones before they go exploring the mountainside to keep them aware of their surroundings. Everyone in that part of my family believes these creatures are native to the Appalachians. My family has heard screams for generations as well. Many of them can imitate it closely, that your hairs will literally stand on end from predator instinct. Everyone in the small community of Morganville took these creatures as fact of life in the area, and I can't see an entire town being mistaken or deluded about native wildlife that many had first-hand accounts with. I don't exactly know what species they are, but they are out there. Perhaps small remnant populations survived and different ecosystems up here have caused them to be melanistic as opposed to their southern relations. Just an interesting thing to think about. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this night ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.